Welcome back.
Yup, that's me. You're probably wondering how the creator of the phrase, "I buy problems," ended up in this situation. Well, it's a long story, so let's start at the beginning. No, the other beginning. No, who's controlling this remote? There we go. Sick of the weather in Boston and running out of toothbrushes to steal, we flew to Los Angeles for some much-needed warmth and to experience what it's like to drive in a real-life GTA lobby. So after carving up Mulholland Drive and taking new pics for Grindr, we made our way over to the Hollywood side, which looked a lot bigger in person. But no LA vacation is complete without rollerblading on the beach of Santa Monica. Or in Lupe's case, attracting wives on the West Coast. Little did we know, while I was busy getting my speed on and Lupe was busy with whatever this is, my enemies were at the right place at the right time. Oblivious to my ops and intrigued by things on wheels going fast, we made our way over to the pier where I briefly lost my wife, before the three of us repaired my marriage by taking a ride on the Ferris wheel. But once again, we weren't alone.
Dude, that's totally him.
Salem Tech novice.
Wanting to confirm my identity, the muscles of iBuyProtein were hot on our trails. Clueless to the danger I was in, we decided to cap off our night in a dim bar with some much-needed tequila. And that's when it all went dark. Lupe, however, continued the party back at the hotel. As for me,
Welcome back.
Whoa, what the I'm
gonna show you exactly what iBuyProblems is.
You can't spawn camp like this. This isn't fair. Lupe, help.
I got it right here.
No, that's my wallet. Lupe.
No.
Your help's gone. You're stuck with us now.
All right, you won. Introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Eric. I'm in charge of quality at iBuyPower. Let me get you out of these.
Thank you. Thank you, Eric.
Pleasure to meet you. I'm Jeffy, lead creative producer here at iBuyPower.
Good to meet you,
have
Jeff.
you here. Let's get started.
Yes,
I'm gonna show you around. Let's go.
being trapped in the iBuyPower server wasn't the worst thing in the world because, jokes aside, it gave me a chance to see behind the curtain of one of the few companies that I've heavily criticized in the past but have since redeemed themselves. And not just through carefully worded PR statements, but by meaningful action. I touched upon this in my 2025 and 26 CES videos, but to give some background to our beef, in 2023 I had a ton of iBuyPower pre-builds coming into my shop for miscellaneous repairs due to defective parts. These were all built between 21 and 22. The most common issues were failed PSUs, RAM, and AIOs. This sudden influx of repairs was my inspiration for their nickname, iBuyProblems. What wasn't obvious to me at the time as a boots-on-the-ground repair shop owner was that this was the inevitable result of a perfect shitstorm for every systems integrator, SI for short. Starting with the massive chip shortage of 21 and 22, followed by an insane increase in demand for pre-built gaming PCs, topped off by a QC process that iBuyPower later acknowledged couldn't properly sustain this sudden influx of demand. And since they are one of the biggest SIs, it made sense they were the most common name on my repair bench. And when I met them at CES in 2025, instead of gaslighting me or trying to dodge my questions, they took accountability, explained the changes they made to their QC, which we'll see in this video, and invited me over to their factory. Unfortunately, we have different definitions of invited. Regardless, they didn't completely ignore valid criticism like some other companies.
We had to cover it. There's no way that we could have charged the customer for something that was our fault.
I mean, well, you could just rebrand to Raise.
But instead, they made fundamental changes to address it, and that earned them their new nickname, iBuyProgress. And in all seriousness, they did pay to fly me out and put me up in a hotel, but I wasn't paid to make this video, and my thoughts aren't for sale. So everything I say here is my honest opinion. and I've been very vocal in the past about my opinion regarding pre-builds. They're a great option for people that don't want to deal with building a PC and don't want to use a local shop for whatever reason. And I know some of you miserable elitists gatekeeping the PC industry hate to hear that, but I've worked with the average consumer for over 10 years, and I know some people have limits to what they're willing to do. And as long as the cost of assembly is reasonable, I'm all for it. We're at a time where pre-builds are more competitively priced than ever, and for the vast majority of consumers, they're still the biggest gateway to the world of PCs. And adding more people to our community should always be the end goal of why we all do what we do. I can't count how many times I've had a customer say they learned how to build a PC by starting with upgrading a pre-build. And regardless of your previous opinion on SIs, I'm hoping that after seeing this video, you'll have a new appreciation for them. Because for me, I was guilty of simplifying their process, underestimating just how complex, time-consuming, and detail-focused a company like this has to be in order to stay afloat. And this trip was also a wake-up call on just how important they are to the overall health of the PC industry. But enough yapping, let's tour that factory, starting with the stash.
So this is our cage where we store all of our processors, all of our SSDs, all of our RAM.
RAM?
Yeah, RAM. Hey!
This was the bathroom you said?
This cage may have been filled with silicon, but my pants contained 100% wood after seeing just how much inventory these guys had to keep on hand in order to fulfill demand. From absurd amounts of every kind of DDR5 RAM, to every make and model NVMe that I'm personally struggling to source for my ThinkPads. Variety is a common theme with iBuyPower. They don't rely on just a single source for their components, so you'll see nearly every manufacturer in this room, which is great for the customer as it provides them more options that fit their budget. Unfortunately, my budget is $0, but that won't stop me from trying.
Everything comes in trays for CPUs.
Magnet
Get
hands.
them in
This right here. You know how many of these you can fit in your pocket? Well, not with your skinny jeans. I told you to wear a cargo
Dude,
pants
I know.
today.
He warned me. He said, we're the baggiest things you can.
These are the graphics cards.
5090?
Don't even think about it.
Can't do it.
The next room in the warehouse contains more cases than the Supreme Court. Everything from Fractal and Cooler Master to iBuyPower and Height, which again highlights the fact that they give the consumer a ton of options. But before any part even gets to this point, it needs to go through rigorous testing to ensure quality and compatibility. And that happens in the lab.
All right, I'm gonna take you to our lab where we do all of our R&D testing. We do all of our parts quality to make sure that all of the stuff that we carry is to our standards. I will hand you off to
Brad, Product Department Manager.
This is our validation lab, right, where we will get components ahead of time. Usually most manufacturers are pretty cool with sending us stuff a few weeks to a few months ahead of when it gets released to the market. We're testing mostly not for performance, that's kind of for the tech press to do, but we're testing for compatibility, right? We want to make sure that if there's going to be problems with components, that we identify those and try to do something about it before we start shipping them into systems. Most components, right, every individual category, there's someone in this lab that's testing it. A lot of our issues recently have been with RAM.
No.
Right. Yeah.
No.
Imagine that. DDR5's kind of been problematic since it came out, in terms of like what the advertised or expected speeds are at certain capacities.
Yes, indeed.
Getting it to run and getting it to run stably, and you know which CPU or chipset seems to be behaving the best changes generation to generation. And so you know we have to go and test a dozen different RAM kits with different CPUs and different motherboards to try and kind of put together like a rule book for the folks who configure systems and create the rules for the website. For example, you know, 64 gigs is fine if you're at 6,000 megahertz, but if you want to go up to 7,200 megahertz, then we're going to keep it at 32 or 48, or you know, these kits work, these kits don't. You know, use this brand or this model if the customer wants more higher speed RAM. It's just been getting more and more busy, especially we've been getting kind of a flood of new kits of memory, you know, stuff that maybe isn't as well vetted by the rest of the industry. The last few months has just been like, there's a new kit of RAM every day that we have to check to see whether or not it's worth allowing it to be configured, or you know, if it doesn't pass our standards, that we say, sorry, we can't carry this. And there's other components that will have like kind of the same story where, you know, every once in a while we'll get a motherboard that has a connector in a weird spot, and we say, you know what, like I don't think this board's going to be popular enough. for having like this weird right angle plug that is going to interfere with a bunch of cases, so we're not going to allow it. Or if it is something popular, we have to create a rule that says, this board only in these cases.
And it's interesting that because you're dealing with such quantity, something passes QC. Now you're dealing with such a quantity where you can kind of become the knowledge base of what is compatible with what, because you've done the tests and you've sold hundreds of machines, so you know the standard. But like, this is the place where you actually find that standard.
Yeah.
No pressure, but you're kind of dictating what the industry trends are going to take off.
Yeah, we're kind of, I guess, the second line of defense. First would be like, obviously the motherboard and the CPU vendors themselves, they do a little bit of their own QC. They have their QVLs that they put together, but they can only test so many combinations.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And just by the nature of our business, we get like hundreds of thousands of combinations of systems flowing through every year.
Because you want to give them choices, right?
Everyone can configure it, especially since it's all happening in one place by the same people using the same testing software, right? Like, we have a little bit better record keeping than like the random people on forums and on Reddit.
Yeah. And
so when we find a problem, identify a pattern, it's not just us, right? There's the other big gaming SIs out there. A lot of the BIOS updates and things that you see, they'll come from SIs reporting problems.
And I feel like the manufacturers would probably be more open to, when you do find a flaw or you do have criticism, they'd be open to somebody that they sell thousands of units to compared to just some guy on Reddit, even though that guy might be right.
Yeah. And, often they are. It's just that they don't have nearly as much of like, well, they saw it happen once with their PC. We saw it happen 50 times, right? And we're able to say like, hey, like, these components aren't what's causing the problem. We put these three things together at this setting, and that's where this issue comes from.
Yeah, I kind of say people don't like to hear it, but in my comments a lot, when I point out an issue, if there was a design flaw with something, and you'll get somebody saying, oh, it didn't happen to me. It's like, well, it doesn't mean the trend doesn't exist, you just got lucky, so go play the lottery. So that's something that it's difficult to explain to somebody, and to see it in person and to hear, you're doing it on another level is kind of eye-opening. It helps me understand the struggle it is to even find a combination that's going to work, and then find hundreds of those combinations that are also going to work, and then provide support for them in case something does happen. Definitely eye-opening. Do you have any more RAM?
If you couldn't tell by my tone, this interview was a huge eye-opener for me. After all these years, my tiny raccoon-like brain never actually thought of the impact SIs have on the industry as a whole because of the simple fact they're dealing with such a diverse combination of parts. Brad saying that they're the second line of defense is an excellent analogy. But how do they deal with a part that passed all QC and compatibility checks, but ends up failing months or even years later? Well, that's exactly what happened to their white-labeled AIOs in 2022. An issue caused by a manufacturing defect that not only resulted in dozens of PCs on my repair bench, but also affected me personally. I had two of these fail on me, and one of them took my CPU down with it. And to this day, it's the sole reason I swore off liquid cooling. So I'm personally invested in hearing how this happened and how iBuyPower came to their decision to do the right thing and recall them.
So these are the said coolers.
So these are some of the original liquid coolers from back, I believe that was like in the 2021, like the kind of COVID era, where we started getting reports of customers having issues where their CPUs were overheating. And at first it was pretty isolated, and we said, okay, well, let's take a look at this, right? We're hearing it show up, more than a couple times. Let's work with those customers, have them send back their coolers. We sent them out a new one so they could swap it out. We took apart some of them to kind of check to see, like, was the pump working, right? Was there something wrong with the coolant? And we did find that on a lot of these that were coming back, that there was like a buildup in the system, little sort of like crystals that would show up. And then when we found some that didn't have it and some that did have it, and started trying to like narrow those down to different serial numbers, which were of course different batches from the factory. And then of course we're working with the factory to let them know what we were finding. You see if they had any records of this kind of thing happening, eventually leading to them finding out kind of what had happened during their manufacturing process, which was that the radiators themselves had some material that was left over from manufacturing that like hadn't been completely flushed out, and it kind of dissolves in the coolant, and then over time it builds up again.
Yeah, that sediment is what I remember when I took them apart.
And so then what we had to do was go and kind of figure out like who all had these, and then ended up replacing them with a newer unit that had different QC put in place during the manufacturing to kind of catch any other issues, because unfortunately some of these are sold into retail, and we don't have direct contact with those customers. So what we had just done was blanket extended our warranty on these coolers from 1 year to 3. And then, hopefully if somebody has an issue, they call back, we can recognize it and say, okay, yeah, you had one of these coolers, we're gonna replace it for you.
If I remember correctly, you guys were the first ones to actually acknowledge that there was an issue with the cooler. And then I found out that the cooler I had was also from the same like manufacturer.
Yeah, there were a few other brands. For these AAOs, there's only like 3 companies that make all of them.
Yeah.
Or at least back then, there weren't a lot of OEMs for these things.
And you switched over to, now you're making, well, during this time you were switching over to the Q60?
Yeah, so at the same time this was happening was when height was starting to kind of show up, and some of our R&D resources had gone to designing the Q60, which was actually with the same factory that was making these. And so we had a lot of learnings, because for the Q60 we were asking for a lot of special features and specs that just weren't available on the off-the-shelf platforms. So we learned a lot about what makes coolers good, how to QC them, but not like in a PC, but like at the factory level, like what kind of QC needs to go into them. And so over the next generation past these was kind of how you end up with a cooler that we sell called the AW4, which is the like iBUYPOWER 2024 model, kind of bundled all in one. And that was kind of like where it forked, right? So you get Q60 on the very high end, giant radiator, dual pumps, giant cold plate, and then the AW4 was the kind of mainstream cooler, and now we have the AW5, and some of those are based on that same manufacturer's platform.
It's crazy from my perspective, because like I was a repair shop inside of a Subway restaurant, and I was dealing with the end user that had these come in. It's kind of just crazy seeing going from there to right here, like right at the source, and seeing how you guys figured out the issues, as well the issues that I was fixing, for customers that were covered under warranty. So it's yeah, I appreciate you showing me all this and telling me the story. A lot of companies wouldn't be that open. Did I see a guy with a shirt off?
No, I didn't see anything. Yeah.
No.
Now, I want to emphasize the fact that what started as me busting the balls of a company because of a defective product ended by the company flying me out, showing me what happened, how they handled it, and how they're making sure it doesn't happen again. This is the level of accountability that all companies should aim for, because no business is perfect. Every company, including mine, will fuck up eventually. But it's how you deal with the fuck-ups that determine if your business values integrity as much as it does profits. And I don't take any company's word for scripture, but the fact I was seeing more of their PCs in for upgrades versus repairs has proven their changes have stuck. And though that should be the standard in operating an honest business, in 2026, that's rare. A big part of these changes had to do with their assembly and quality control process. So let's start with assembly.
This is our assembly area. There are 19 other stations just like this one, where all of our seasoned assemblers will build out all the custom configurator orders. Every single system has a minimum standard, so they all have to have good wiring. They all have to follow wiring guides for stuff such as like fan headers, which plugs are used by which fans, what's used by the liquid coolers, stuff like that. Every single system's different, so the assemblers have a lot of training with a variety of components. They get to see a ton of different components a day, and they get to get hands-on with every single one of them.
This one looks like does it have a 5090 in there?
Oh,
or it had no, it's all right. No.
Are you sure?
The wire management obviously is the worst part of the job.
That is the majority of the time spent on a computer. And because we raised our minimum standard for cable management, it does take longer. Each build does take roughly 45 minutes to complete. And each day assembly will do about 10 systems. And they all have to follow an SOP. Everything has a way of being installed, which fans are intake, which fans are exhaust, where to install different fans is usually the biggest change that a system will have. They all do have this electric screwdriver, which they're all set to the same torque speed. And that is the best balance of it is screwing something in tight enough without over torquing it. Yeah. And it won't damage the motherboards or anything, so that's why we use them.
Yeah, I think people underestimate the amount of time it actually takes to turn a freaking screwdriver.
Oh,
it adds up, especially when you're doing, I guess, 10 systems a day.
If we didn't have these, I would assume that there's another like 15 minutes of just
easy
hand cranking.
15,
yeah. The assembler will take the box of parts, assemble everything here. They'll hook it up to a monitor to test post.
Yep.
And then after that, it'll go over to our QC area.
Okay. Well, let this gentleman get back to work. That 5090s doesn't exist.
What 5090?
Yeah, exactly. Yes. See? I slid him some money.
Now that the computers are built, the next stop is to stress test them and make sure they work.
So this is our QC area. This is where every system comes to get all of its quality checks done. Every system is going to have a physical inspection. They're going to run through the stress tests and make sure that everything is functioning properly.
And this is how you do it with OCCT?
Yeah, so this is our QC burn-in area. Everything from Windows installation, BIOS tuning to stress test happens here. We also do physical inspections of all of the systems. So we make sure that all the wiring is nice and neat. There's no scratches, scrapes, any defects on the case or any of the individual components. After we do those physical inspections, we'll run through the entire software experience. So installing Windows, it comes from an image on our network. So every image has what we need baked into it. We'll do the BIOS tuning. So making sure XMP or Expo is enabled. We want to make sure that our fans are running at the correct profiles. They're monitoring CPU temperature. If they're PWM fans, they're set to PWM mode.
Okay.
And then also making sure that all the BIOSes are updated to the latest version. After Windows is installed, BIOS is tuned, we go through our drivers suite, making sure that every single driver is up to date, that there's no missing drivers, making sure that any additional software needed to run certain components, like say a Corsair cooler, NZXT cooler, or Height Nexus cooler, we make sure that those softwares are installed so that way the customer has everything they need to run the computer right out of the box.
The least amount of effort involved in the customer side.
Yeah, we want it to be as ready as possible for the customers when they receive the systems.
I have a hard time updating drivers for a ThinkPad, which is just a one, you know.
Oh yeah.
So, I mean, it must be tough trying to keep up to date. I would assume you guys have to be like on point every day.
Oh yeah. Typically we'll go through and update drivers once a week. That goes for all the motherboard drivers, the graphics drivers, and anything else that may be installed. After all the drivers are installed, we verify that there's nothing missing. We'll run our stress test. So our stress test is OCCT. We always try and keep it on as up to date as possible. And we have our custom run schedule. Our stress test is 1 hour and 5 minutes. We'll start off with a 5-minute storage test just to make sure that the SSD isn't overheating. We'll then run a 30-minute memory test. We've found that most memory will fail either immediately on boot, where you won't get a screen at all, it will fail to post. If we do catch something in the memory test, it'll happen usually within the 10 to 15 minute mark. So 30 minutes gives us plenty of buffer to make sure that we catch any errors with memory that are possible. After that, we'll run through a 3D adaptive test. 3D adaptive test is going to stress the graphics card at a high usage and then a low usage, and it's going to switch back and forth to make sure that it can handle those loads. And once we've gone through all that, it'll run a 15-minute power test. So that's going to test the entire system. For thermals, we're going to run the CPU at max frequency, at max power. We're going to run the graphics card at max power, and that combined load, we're going to make sure that the power supply can support it.
Yeah.
And also that it doesn't thermal throttle, because that is one of the biggest issues that a lot of configurations can have, is if it's not properly spec'd for cooling, if it's not properly spec'd for case size, you can run into issues with thermals. Luckily, we have a bunch of filters on our website, so anything that is running a higher TDP will require a 360 cooler or a 240 cooler.
I was just gonna ask that, because one of the beefs I had with, I'm not gonna say the company's name, it wasn't Bison, but they sold a computer to a customer that had a i9, I think it was a 14900K, and they gave him a 240, and it was overheating like right out of the box, and he came to me, and I was like, well, why didn't they have a filter on their website where it prevents you, because the customer doesn't know any, I mean, the customer is trusting the pre-built company to inform them of what they should do. You know, the customer just has to say, I want to do video editing, I want to do gaming. Okay, let's help you do that. But they gave him a 240, and that was one of my, I was going to mention that, and it's nice that you guys already have that filter in there.
Everything has been tested to run at least the AMD's or Intel's recommended setting.
Yeah, and if the customer wants to overclock it, it's up to them, but that's kind of a given anyways.
Yeah, and most of our systems do ship with 360 liquid coolers, so they do have that headroom to overclock if they want to.
Gotcha. Okay. Yeah. No, this is impressive. I'm curious too. How do you find, and this is impossible, how do you find the long-term problems? Because like an AIO, for example, will fail, but it only failed after took it a year. You know, it took it 9 months to fail, so that must be a huge pain in the ass. How would you even go about reproducing that issue?
There are a lot of issues that we don't catch until later on.
Yeah.
We'll notice trends in customer repairs or customer returns where it'll have, oh, every single repair for the past month has had this like 240 liquid cooler,
Yep.
or it's had this specific part. Let's go back, let's revalidate it, let's look at the data, see what's failing. And some of this stuff will not fail right away, but over time, over wear and tear,
Yep.
it'll start degrading. And that's where we get a lot of that data is through our customer repairs.
And when that happens, obviously, it's how you deal with it. You don't just ignore me, and you don't respond to any of my inquiries or anything like that. And that's hence why I'm actually here right now, right? Is that you don't
Yeah.
ignore it, you address it. So you guys sell like a metric ass load of units every year, so I can imagine it's pretty difficult to keep up with maintaining QC. But it is nice to see it in person.
If we do notice that there is a lot of returns or a lot of defects for a certain part, that rate has gone up recently, we'll revisit that validation. We'll go through and retest that part, make sure that the units that we have in our warehouse are performing the way that we expect them to perform. And we'll reach out to the vendors saying, hey, we're getting a lot of your product back. We want you guys to investigate it and give us either a solution to what's happening, or we're not going to carry this product anymore. It has helped a lot with preventing a lot of the bad products from reaching customers out in the field.
Yeah, so the shit show gets caught here
Yeah.
before it goes there. Was COVID the real like stress test for that?
Oh yeah.
Because obviously that's where my whole nickname came from, was during COVID, when you guys had it was the power supply and the AIO issue. Which, as time went on, I realized you weren't the only ones, but you were the only ones who actually publicly took accountability and then implemented the changes and stuff. So I'm sure that really, it's 6 years later, and you're probably still seeing some of those AIOs come in.
COVID was the biggest stress test that we had because it was almost overnight. The demand for systems just skyrocketed. Everybody was working from home. Everybody needed something to do to pass the time. Everybody was told to, shelter in place. So we got a huge amount of orders, just effectively overnight. And to keep up with those orders, we didn't want to have a 6-week backlog. Customers want their systems, within like a week.
Yeah, you're gonna get a complaint if you.
So during that time, we did end up, using a shorter stress test. We ended up trying to gather parts from wherever we could, and it bit us in the butt. The liquid cooler issue slid through the cracks, and it wasn't until many, many months later that we realized, oh, there's something wrong here. We still get calls to this date about those old systems, those liquid coolers failing, and we'll replace them under warranty. You may have noticed that we do save the graphics card boxes, and that's because for a lot of these systems, we do ship the graphics card uninstalled.
Okay.
Every system will get a instruction guide on how to install the graphics card, but during COVID, we learned that graphics cards are getting heavier, and that sometimes even the Instapack foam isn't enough to hold that graphics card in place. There's a little bit of flex there, and that's enough to break both the card and the motherboard. So as a solution, we save the boxes that the graphics cards come in, and we ship it uninstalled.
When that did happen, when they started breaking off, did you cover it?
Yeah. Every single time we had to eat the cost of the graphics card, the motherboard, as well as the shipping to get it back to us and back to them.
Ouch. But you covered it, and that's all. That's the big thing that matters, because it's not, if it's going to mess up, it's how you deal with the mess up. That's kind of the whole thing.
Oh yeah,
right?
we had to cover it. There's
Yeah.
no way that we could have charged the customer for something that was our fault.
Yeah. I mean, well, you could just rebrand to Raise.
And that concludes our tour. This experience was a massive eye-opener. I'm walking away with a new appreciation for what SIs actually do, and a ton of respect for iBuyPower being so transparent and flying me out so they could take accountability without relying on excuses. But that doesn't mean they get a pass for dropping the ball. The reality is, unless a company is being intentionally anti-consumer or just flat out gaslighting us about their mistakes, we should give them the opportunity to redeem themselves. And I can confidently say that iBuyPower has successfully done so. After vetting their process from start to finish, I'd have no problem recommending their pre-builds to someone who's shopping for one. And with that said, it's time to wrap this up.
All right, man. Thank you for the tour. I might not agree in the unconventional manner you brought me here, but I do appreciate you going out of your way to well, kidnap me and then show me how this place operates. And yeah, thank you for that.
I'm really, really glad that we can show you our ways, and I'm really glad that you're happy with everything that you saw. Yeah, it was great seeing you.
Yeah, you too. Thank you.
Wait! That's better.
Lupe!
Gross. That's the middle name disgusting.
Sorry, our VP just walked in.
5090?
Don't even think about it.
Shit, did I Oh, it's moving. Shit. All right.